Hello and welcome back to the online sociology lesson series. Last time I looked at the process and general rules for writing 10-mark theory and methods answers for paper 1 and paper 3. In this video I'm going to look at a model answer and the ingredients used for another question, or a specific question if you like. Last time I focused on a specific research method. Here is another example of a question that you could be asked. Outline and explain 2 factors that affect choice of research method. I've made this question up based on the requirements of the specification and the certainty of the command words, but it hasn't actually appeared as an exam question in this particular form. Here, you're required to think of 2 factors that affect choice of research method. When we're discussing research method, we mean whether or not we choose to use, for example, a questionnaire or an interview, past observation, secondary data. It's useful to employ a bit of Verstehen here, I think. If I ask you to choose a research method to investigate any particular topic, which research method would you choose? Why would you choose it? And the answer to that question that you give will give you a bit of insight into this question. We can apply the general rules to this particular question as we did last time if you just want to familiarise yourselves with what is a requirement for this question, because as I say, you will be doing this across all 3 papers, and in fact twice on paper 2. But in terms of research methods, once on paper 1 and once on paper 3. But as I say, these are the general rules that we need to think about when penning our exam responses. If we use the slimmed down version of the plan, we'd simply need to state a factor, explain that factor in this case for the rest of the paragraph, and then repeat the process with the second factor. Let's have a look, as I said, at a particular or a specific worked example. This is the first paragraph. I want you to have a read through this first. Press pause as you do that. And then again for paragraph number 2. Just have a read through first, see what you think. What do you like, what do you not like? Let's have a look at paragraph 1 then. The first thing to note here is the candidate has noted a factor that does affect the choice of research method, and in this instance is correct. The key thing to note here, and this is what is good about this answer, is the rest of this paragraph is doing as required, and that is it's relating that and developing that factor according to how and why. In this case, it is practical factors affect the choice of research method. So that's the key point here. We've identified the factor. That's what we need to be thinking about for the rest of this paragraph. How am I going to develop this? What do I need to do? And hopefully you can see this candidate does this quite well. We've got a brief explanation in pink, and then a link to a specific method in the lighter shade of pink. So I've used the example here of practical factors in general. I've explained a bit about them in this case, and then we've given an example of a specific method, partisan observation. If you're finding that your answers are not getting many marks because you're getting feedback saying, oh, it lacks detail, needs more detail, needs more, you need to say more, then the section I've highlighted in orange may help you here, because what this candidate has done is they've developed their explanation further. It's not just saying that some methods take a long time or partisan observations taking a long time. It's saying exactly why they take a long time. What is it about this method in particular that takes a long time? So this is the expansion, the chain of reasoning, if you like, or in simplistic terms, it's just adding more detail to your response. And that's what the orange section does. It says why they take a long time. We've got some use of specialist terminology. Again, the examiner is going to like this, highlighted in light green. The native costume, in other words, are you going to fit in with what the group that you're studying looks like? And then we've got an example from an actual sociological research study. This is highlighted in the light blue section here. Please note, this is what you need to be aiming for when you're using the examples. It's really good to use examples, but, and this is the point, don't get too so worried about this, the name of the study isn't really what makes this good. What makes it good is the way that this candidate has used this study. And that is, they've used the study to show the examiner exactly how the factor of time, relates to the choice of method. They've used the example from Patrick's study, but as I said, if you took the word Patrick out and you just used the example, that's still really good in terms of the development of this. It's an example. Obviously, it's going to be better if you can remember that it's Patrick that did this, but it's not the end of the world if you can't. Note how this paragraph finishes. We've got a clear link back to the essay title. We haven't got an evaluation, but if you go back to what we said in the last video, you don't actually need direct evaluation for this question. And that's coming, as I say, directly from the examiner's report at AQA. Right, let's have a look at paragraph 2. Again, we can see we've got a clear factor identified really early on. So another factor that's going to affect your choice of research method here is your theoretical perspective. So that's what we're looking for in terms of something that's accurate. So we've identified a clear factor in the opening sentence, and then we've got a brief explanation of this in light pink, as you can see here. And then we've got a link to a specific research method. In this case, we've gone with a secondary data source, official statistics, and we've got some use of concepts in light green. So the student's talking about objective, they've talked about reliable as well. You might even want to define some of these terms as well if you wanted to add even more detail. In orange, developing the point a bit further. And then in blue, again, use of an example. It's not a study, but in this case, it's an example of how these statistics are useful. What's the point of them in terms of what do they actually do? How might we use these in sociological research? And that's where the examples are really useful to try and illustrate points or develop points. In this case, why is theoretical perspective going to be a really important factor when you're deciding your method? How does it link to a method? Can you think of an example that develops this? We don't have a link back to the question in this one as we do in paragraph 1. Room for improvement perhaps, but does it satisfy the requirements of a top mark band answer? If this was done under time conditions in an exam, does it have good knowledge and understanding of 2, in this case, factors? It does. Does it apply that knowledge with appropriate analysis? And I think in this case, it does hit those targets. So I'm going to give it 10 out of 10. It's accurate, there's a lot of detail, it's well developed, and the examples are used really well to illustrate the 2 points. So we've got 2 clear paragraphs, and they are both really well developed, and that's going to score 10 out of 10 under time conditions in this particular example. Given that you know what the command word is going to be here, and that you're familiar with the specification for this particular area, you can start making up and timing yourself answering all sorts of combinations for this type of question. At its most basic level, you should be able to identify at the very least 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages of each of these research methods and their variations. If you want to go even further, as I say, you can actually write out your answers to each of those, giving yourself timed limits to do that in. Do not delay practicing answering some exam questions today.